Hello, this is Cameron, and welcome to another video by the Lab Maniacs. As always, we have all deck lists from this video listed in the description below, as well as our social media info. Thank you for watching, and enjoy the show.
Hey everybody, Dan here from the Laboratory Maniacs, and today we are bringing you another deck tech. So in this one, we would like to highlight a custom brew that our resident Cameron has come up with. So Cameron, would you like to talk us into your deck a little bit?
Yeah, it's a control deck for competitive EDH. It uses Tasigur, and it really just tries to stop everybody else from doing what they want to do and slow the game down.
So what does Tasigur do that helps you achieve that goal?
Tasigur lets me reuse any card that's in my graveyard, and it also lets me draw cards without actually drawing them. So I can use abilities or effects that prevent people from drawing extra cards and work around it with Tasigur.
Interesting. So does your deck actively play with your commander?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Tasker is very integral to this deck. One of the big things is that he's usually very cheap to cast, and so I can cast him and use him as a beater if I need to. But then also I can cast him for 1 mana and still leave mana up to activate him and start getting cards out of my graveyard.
Interesting. I can see how being able to reuse some of those priorly spent cards would be beneficial in trying to negate the downsides of one for oneing three different opponents at the same time.
Yeah, he definitely does help with that. Running out of spells is one of the big challenges with a control deck, and being able just to ask somebody which one they want to give me when we both don't like what's happening makes it so I can actually get a pretty good option and get usually the exact thing I need to prevent somebody from winning the game.
I have been on both sides of that many times now, so I
Yes.
can certainly attest to that. So, how do you usually win with this deck?
So I've got several different avenues to win. Uh, there's a primary combo. It came from the Banana Ball deck that came out of the cEDH Reddit, which is once you have infinite mana, you can then activate Tasker, get all of the non-land cards from your library and your grave, put them into your hand, and then you can cast Beast Within, targeting a permanent. It goes to the graveyard, you activate Tasker again, you get Beast Within back, and you repeat this process until you destroy everything your opponents control. Then you get Reality Shift, and that says exile target creature. That creature's controller manifests the top card of their library, so they take a card from the top of their library, put it on the battlefield face down. Then you activate Tasker, get Reality Shift back, and repeat that process again. So you not only destroy everything they have, but then you exile all of their libraries, exile the last one again, just to be safe, cast Cyclonic Rift. They have no permanents, they have no library, and you can pass the turn, or cast like a Time Twister and make everybody draw 7 cards. They don't have 7 cards in their hand, then they shuffle them into their library, try to draw 7, lose the game. There's other options. One of the combos that I have is Seasons Past. If I have infinite mana and I, for some reason, can't activate Tasigur, say there's a Cursed Totem out, I can use infinite mana or Omniscience to cast Seasons Past and get a tutor from my graveyard and put it into hand, put Seasons Past on the bottom of the library. Then I cast a tutor, get another tutor, cast that other tutor, get Seasons Past, and now I can Seasons Past and get 2 tutors from my graveyard. From there, I cast a tutor, get anything I want, then cast the other tutor and get Seasons Past, and I repeat this process and cast whatever I need to win the game. One of the big ways I have of generating infinite mana is Palinchron and Phantasmal Image. And if I've got Palinchron, I also have a way of just winning with Aetherflux Reservoir. I can cast Palinchron or the Palinchron Phantasmal Image combo multiple times and just get a gigantic storm count with the Reservoir, then dome everybody.
That is a
Yeah,
very diverse set of win conditions.
yeah, it's kind of the ability where a lot of them interact with each other, and it makes it so they're very modular. I can use one engine to power one of three or four different combo victory sets. So, a lot of the way the deck is set up is that every single card individually is very strong on its own and has a lot of utility. But then when they get together, they just say, "I win the game."
Yeah, I think we were actually even talking about that kind of a deck building strategy among ourselves earlier today, and I very much support the idea that um, modular win conditions that work together is one of the most efficient ways to deck build. Um,
It is very efficient. It does have the problem that if you don't diversify enough, you can have issues where part of your win condition is exiled.
yeah,
I mean, I cast a Beast Within early on, and somebody knows my deck and they know that's part of my win condition with Infinite Mana Tasigur. They could exile it with a Bajuku Bog or a Scavenging Ooze. And that is kind of one of the downsides with the deck is you have to be careful as to what you exile with Tasigur, and you have to be very cautious of, do I need this spell or can I live without this spell anymore? So sometimes I don't cast Tasigur until, turn 7 or 8 even, because I don't have enough cards in my graveyard. There hasn't been enough interaction, and I don't want to exile those cards. If I've got an Abrupt Decay, a Mana Drain, and a Counterspell in the graveyard, I never want to exile those cards. I would rather pay 6 mana for Tasigur every single time and keep those cards available to me to get back if I need them. So it's kind of a balance there, and having the cards, having a few extra win cons really helps to make it so that you're not so dependent on that modular, really strong but very narrow win condition.
very interesting. So it sounds like a lot of your Tasigur windows where you can cast him, or things like maybe Yawgmoth's Will Turn, you have to really thread the needle between what you can and what you cannot live without.
Yes, actually, 9 times out of 10 when I cast Yawgmoth's Will in this deck, I am telling myself I will not win this turn. One of the things to be very aware of with Yawgmoth's Will is Tasigur's ability no longer works. It will get you cards from your graveyard to your hand, but it will never put any more cards in your graveyard. Uh, I don't run Lab Maniac in the deck, so if I exile my whole library with Tasigur, I just lose at that point. So Yawgmoth's Will in this deck is kind of interesting in that it's really a value card. It's not a, hey guys, I'm winning the game right now card. It's, I see an opportunity to get ahead. I'll play a fetch land and not crack it this turn. I'll cast an extra creature from my grave and get as much as I can out of that, rather than just, all right, let's go in balls to the walls. We can't do that with this deck. It's much more methodical and slow paced in that regard.
Interesting. So, what happens if things aren't breaking your way? What happens if a Bojuka Bog takes out, let's say, your Palinchron, your Aetherflux Reservoir, your Beast Within? What can you do to win then?
I can remove everything they throw at me, reanimate it, and beat them in the face with it. And I have done it. I've got a Phantasmal Image. It really works great as a Carador. It works great as an Elish Norn. Animate Deads are really great on Ionas. They're also really great on Leovolds. There's so many things that your opponents have that I can remove, and then I can use it with the other cards that I have.
For those of you following along at home in off-camera games, Cameron has Animate Dead on my Iona when I'm playing Carador and he's playing Tasigur more times than I've had my Iona in play against him, which is not fun.
This is true.
It is not fun at all, let me tell you.
Very true.
So we've talked about some of the ways that you can win the game.
It's kind of a joke.
What do you do to get yourself into a position where you can execute these win conditions?
So one of the things with the deck that is actually a requirement is getting to 5 or 6 mana. I've noticed that as I've been playing through the deck, right now I think I probably have upwards of 60 games on it in plus or minus 3 cards right now. you need to get to 5 or 6 mana as fast as possible. At the same time, you don't want to overload on colorless mana because really, once you get to a point of having Tasigur on the field, you are only concerned about blue and green mana because you want to be able to activate Tasigur every single chance you get at the end of the turn before your turn. You basically want to say, all right, I waded through everything that my opponents have done, and now I just want to get some value. And you activate Tasigur, get a card, and then go to your turn, untap, and figure out where to go from there. I mean, so things that I have added to get there are ways of getting lands out on the field faster. So I've got Burgeoning, I've got Exploration, Life from the Loam to reuse those fetch lands. I've only got a few mana rocks, and most of the mana rocks are either net positive mana or are used to convert colorless mana to blue or green. I mean, so Simic Signet, it can turn my black mana in the later stages of the game into blue and green so that I can use coffers and fuel the lower part of Tasigur and then change some of that black into the colored mana. What I'm really looking at to get from the start of the game into those win conditions is fast mana and disruption. And if I can have card draw, that is the dream. If you've got 1 or 2 pieces of interaction, 1 piece of card draw, and enough mana to get you to 3 or 4 mana in 2 or 3 turns, you're good. You've got a hand that you'll always love. It'll get you from the start of the game into mid-game, and that's our main goal. If we can get to mid-game, a lot of the combo decks are already at the point where they needed to win or they start to lose. They have tried to combo off, they've either been fizzled or they haven't gotten everything they need to do that combo. And you're 90% of the way through to what you need to get.
Interesting. So what are some of the cards you use to do that, to interact with your opponents or to protect yourself?
Well, I've got a whole suite of counter spells. I mean, we've got Force of Will, Pact of Negation, Flusterstorm, Swan Song, Counterspell, Mana Drain, Arcane Denial, and you just want to be able to interact with those combo decks in the counter arena. Also, I've got a large suite of targeted removal, both creature-centric and non-creature-centric. Beast Within, Abrupt Decay, Rapid Hybridization, Demure Charm, which can really catch people off because it hits creatures power 2 or less, or sorceries. So it's kind of one of those flexible things where it can hit a creature or it can counter a spell. I mean, Demure Charming a Time Twister, or Demure Charming a Yisan. Either way, you're in a good spot to interact with the big win conditions of other decks.
So we have a list of questions that we like to go through. This one kind of falls by the wayside in this deck tech because what does your deck do better than other similar decks? Well, I think Cameron can attest there really aren't similar decks in competitive EDH as far as we're aware.
Yeah, we really haven't found control decks. And one of the reasons that I didn't really like competitive EDH from the start is I'm not a stacks player. I've been playing Magic since 2006. I started EDH in 2008. I never really enjoyed stacks type elements. And I've been playing EDH for so long that combo is kind of the faux pas. It's the social contract is I'm not going to combo off. And so the thought with going to competitive is if everybody sits down at the table with nukes and a nuke goes off, no one cares. So at that point, all right, stacks is available. I've got maybe 10 games in over a decade of play that was a stacks game. I mean, they're like random cube games from way back when, and I've got no experience really playing it very well. And then combo, I've got an idea of combo. I've watched combo games all the time, but it doesn't seem very fun to me to just rush to combo, to cast a Pyretic Ritual, Dark Ritual, Cabal Ritual, and then be like, Mind's Desire, hope I win, hope. Oh crap, I didn't do it. It doesn't feel like as as much of an intelligent type game. I always called Magic it's a game of chess where both players sit down at the table and bring their own pieces, and then you try to figure it all out because there's only 15,000 separate pieces you can play with, and you go at it. And I'm very much so into the deck building and the thought process behind the deck. And I love grindy control. If I could say I have a favorite card, it's Life from the Loam, just because it is constant value. And unless people have lived in a Life from the Loam environment, they don't realize just how good it is and how well you can abuse it. And getting a grindy non-stacks deck doesn't exist. So I went about trying to figure out how to do that. In actuality, this deck originated in just a battle cruiser, semi-casual Tasigur deck where I was trying to challenge myself to get the best Seasons Past I ever could. So I put in everything from... I tried to balance it out from a decent mana curve, but have good targets for Seasons Past from 1 through 6. And then I played this heads up, and it was the most brutal game I ever played against somebody. It was disgusting. And I realized that I actually might have found something in how effective the deck was at just interacting and not having to worry about my board state and just looking at your board state and dealing with your board state. From there, I went through multiple iterations. People told me the deck was way too casual, and I had to figure out, all right, well, hey, what's a competitive deck? What's the level of interaction on a competitive deck? Figure out the efficiencies. And after a month or so, I got to pretty close to what I wanted. And there's a few changes I would make depending on meta. So I've got, as some people have said, how do you not die with this deck? In reality, if you are playing in a creature-heavy meta, my deck as is will not work. In competitive EDH, it is not a creature-heavy meta, so you really don't have to worry about things turning sideways at you. You don't have to worry about a rogue Sylvos coming at your face because they don't
I don't even know what that card does.
It's Sylvos, Rogue Elemental. It's an 8/5 trampling beater with regenerate. It was the quintessential beat stick from, Onslaught era? Right behind Spiritmonger as far as the cheap yet efficient green beaters.
I've heard of Spiritmonger.
Yeah, so...
Never seen one. Was that in a dual deck once, too? It might have been in a dual deck.
I don't think he was in a dual deck.
Have not seen a Sylvos ever.
In competitive EDH, there isn't commander damage, really. There's no deck focused on getting 21 points of commander damage. There's no deck overly focused on getting a bunch of 6/6s on the field and swinging at your face. There is, well, I'm Yisan. I want to get a ton of mana, and then I'm just going to drop a Crater Hoof and kill you. And there is Leovolts that are 3/3s, and there's your token commanders, but nothing that is just going to persistently dome you in the face for 5. So you kind of don't have to worry about that. You've got a few pieces of mass removal, and you work from there.
Very interesting stuff. So I know you touched on it a bit, but just to sum up, so some of the stuff that you are slightly weaker at than stacks is your reliance on your graveyard, especially to try and recur some of those pieces that you've already used and to try and be able to make up for lost card advantage. Would that be an accurate assessment?
That is the case.
So something like a rest in peace.
If somebody drops a rest in peace, rest in peace kind of hurts, but you can live through it. There have been a lot of times, there's been a few games where I've actually had a rest in peace on the stack, and you activate Tasigur, and someone gave me back a Pact of Negation. And I had enough resources, there was about 10, 15 cards in my grave, that you kind of weigh it, and you have to figure out, what have I fought? What am I still expecting from this table? Because I don't know the deck lists. but I've got a good idea. I mean, if it's Arkham, you expect it's going to be artifacts and it's going to be some sort of combo. They're going to have creatures, etc., etc., etc. If it's Grand Arbiter Augustine, it's stacks. It's guaranteed to be stacks, and you got to figure out what you're going from there. If it's Isan, it's creatures. So you kind of think, what am I expecting to come, and do I really care about my grave? So, I mean, there's been times where Rest in Peace is on the stack, and I do everything I can to counter that because I know like the very next thing is going to be a Helm of Obedience. But there's other times where I wait for Rest in Peace to resolve, and then I wait for the Helm to resolve and have them poke at me with one with the Helm, and then Abrupt Decay the Rest in Peace. Because you can, and because it lets them show their hand, and you don't care about it anymore. You've just removed their combo piece. They got nothing.
And
they did everything they could to resolve that and try to kill me. They fizzled. Let's move on. I'm still going.
So you also touched upon this before, but your weaknesses, the real weaknesses the deck has. What would you say is the number one thing that really hurts this deck?
Having too many combo players at the table, and Blood Moon. If there are too many people, the Fun Police can't catch everybody. I think the deck probably works best with one stacks or one interactive combo player on the table and two others doing whatever the hell they want to do. If there's one other person that can randomly stop another combo player from going off, this deck can usually do very well. It has enough interaction that it isn't always the Fun Police, but it can do the best. It can do very well in those cases. Having to deal with a Blood Moon is difficult. There are a few options of artifact mana and creature mana that can get through there. At the same time, when a Blood Moon's down, you also have other players that are stuck underneath it and are really working hard to get out of it. So it's one of the things with the deck is that you're usually not the only one fighting a problem. And that's probably the thing that makes the deck shine the most, is that whenever there's something that really hurts it, it's also hurting somebody else. And somebody else is incentivized to either help you or fight what's hurting it. So there's been games where I've had a Carador deck sit there with a Gaddock T-Gout and a Teferi deck sit there with a Torpor Orb out. And then they start fighting back and forth with different pieces of hate. So, there's a Spirit of the Labyrinth and there's a Winter Orb. Hey, Carador, do you want to give me that Beast Within so I can get rid of that Winter Orb? Sure. Beast Within the Winter Orb. Wait a turn. Hey, Teferi, you want to give me that Beast Within so that I can get rid of that Spirit of the Labyrinth? Sure. Get rid of the Spirit of the Labyrinth. So that unfortunately does lead into the other downside of this deck. It gives away 3/3s. A lot of 3/3s. And those 3/3s generally tend to come back home in the combat zone. Gilded Drake is the only one that we really can't fight with our commander, but the rest of them we can block with Tasigur and not take face damage there. But that is one of the downsides that you will notice with this deck, is that with Rapid Hybridization, or if you choose Pongify or Beast Within, even Swansong, Gilded Drake, you're giving away tokens, getting rid of better things, but they're still creatures. And sometimes in competitive EDH, people just forget about them. They don't realize there's a combat step. They just go main phase 1, main phase 2, move on. And it actually kind of really plays into competitive EDH. Hey, I just destroyed your thing. Have a token. Okay. And the person never remembers it, or they're not used to actually thinking about the combat steps, so they just skip it. And you have a little bit of the dichotomy there of eventually somebody says, "Hey, why don't you swing at whoever killed? Why don't you swing at Tasigur with that beast?" And then you now have to figure out how to deal with that beast. But it's just kind of it's an interesting challenge in that I am actively looking at ways of getting rid of things I'm giving away, even though they're getting rid of other things that are being annoying.
Very interesting. And I know enough of those stupid tokens you've given away have come back to hit me in the face
That that is
over
true.
some number of
The
videos, so
other
I don't
part
appreciate
is
it much
that
either.
the other part is that you're also giving away tokens that can beat other players that don't actually that are a challenge. Like
That run ad
if
nauseum, basically, is what it comes
exactly
down
if
to.
you run ad nauseum,
Then
everybody at
smorg
the
face
table
Dan.
hates you.
Otherwise,
Yeah,
they're going back at you.
exactly. That's generally the case.
So let's transition from talking about the deck to looking more at specific hands. So, what would you describe as a god hand? What would you describe as a hand that you would instantly mulligan? And what would be a hand that you would have to really think about before making a decision?
So the first hand I have today is a Gilded Drake, a Swan Song, a Scalding Tarn, a Life from the Loam, a Mox Diamond, a Mystic Remora, and a Mana Crypt. So what
Hmm.
this can do is this can give us 4 mana on turn 2 with a Mystic Remora in play and have an active Life from the Loam that is then dredging cards, getting us delve targets for Tasigur, also getting us lands. So we can, turn 1, Mox Diamond, pitch the Scalding Tarn, Mana Crypt, then Life from the Loam, get the Tarn back, crack the Tarn, get a blue duel, and then get a blue duel, and then cast Remora. From there, we can choose how we want to go from there. I mean, we can dredge Life from the Loam at any point off of the Remora. Generally, early game for other players is going to be artifacts heavy for mana acceleration or enchantments like Carpet of Flowers, Sylvan Library, things like that. So having a Mystic Remora in play on turns 1 through 3 is usually a lot more valuable than having it in play on 4, 5, 6. And getting it out early gets us that quick acceleration to then fuel out the rest of the game. I mean, also having a Gilded Drake being available to cast on turn 2 lets you steal a Yisan, lets you steal a Leovold, or, I mean, even if you really need it, like a Deathrite Shaman to protect your Life from the Loam. I mean, you're going to be able to cast it before anything else is out there. So it's super useful in that regard. Also, Swan Song, some minor protection for early storm or early pieces of removal. Definitely useful.
That's a pretty solid hand. I know Mystic Remora is one of the strongest, like, turn 1 plays you can have that's just a single card. Obviously, like, outside of just winning. But the value you can get off turn 1 Remora in cEDH is ridiculous. So, let's talk about a hand that you think is kind of just, you'd immediately shuffle it back in.
A hand I would immediately shuffle back in. Okay, so I've got a Mana Confluence, a Cabal Coffers, a Felwar Stone, a Thought Vessel, Sylvan Library, Chains of Mephistopheles, and a Palancron. So it's got really tempting things. It has Sylvan Library, it's got Chains of Mephistopheles, it's got some mana acceleration, it's got bad mana acceleration, and it's got lands that make these things incastable. It also has a combo piece that we really don't want to see. One of the big things is in this deck, you don't want combo pieces early unless they're interactive pieces. If this was a Phantasmal Image, it'd be a lot better because I could use it as something early on and then cash it in later once it dies. But yeah, this would go away right away. It does nothing turns 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's nothing this hand will actually do without drawing extra cards. And we want to try to actually have a plan from our opening hand going forward.
That makes a lot of sense. So let's talk about a hand that you have to really think about.
Yeah, so as an example here, a City of Brass, a Forest, a Burgeoning, a Mana Crypt, Pernicious Deed, Force of Will, and a Seedborn Muse. So it has some mana acceleration. It's got Burgeoning. You could put a Forest and a City of Brass out turn one. It's got a Mana Crypt. So you're in line for 4 mana on turn two, which is good, but it doesn't have any follow up lands. It doesn't have any way of drawing cards. And your one piece of board interaction nukes away your own mana acceleration. If you activate Pernicious Deed for, anything above, one even, you lose both the Crypt and Burgeoning. And generally, you're going to activate it for 2 or 3 almost all the time to get rid of a Leovold, Isan, etc., etc., etc. So it's a challenge. This would be a hand that if I knew everybody else was not feeling happy, I might keep. Or if I knew I was in a slower game, I might keep this. But if this is a Storm combo game, no, this isn't really keepable. It's kind of going to be a gut feeling regarding how the table is looking at the game.
That makes sense. Pernicious Deed certainly seems like it's going to do a whole lot more work against a Yisan deck or against a Carador deck necessarily than like against a Jaleva Storm list or something.
Yeah. So it's really, if Pernicious Deed would just blank a player, keep it. If Pernicious Deed would, if you're playing against Edric, you can drop a Pernicious Deed turn 2, and they cry, and then they cry, and then they cry again, and then you cast Tasigur, and another player gives it back to you, and then Edric scoops. Because they really can't do anything without dorks on the field, and they're casting 1 or 2 mana dorks, and you just Pernicious Deed over and over and over. And other players are more than happy to give you Pernicious Deed back because they're probably not having dorks in play.
Yeah, if you keep blowing it up, then just pick the guy without something, and you'll get it right back.
Exactly.
Interesting. So those are some really cool hands. Thank you, Cameron, for joining me today in showcasing your fascinatingly unique Tasigur control list. This has been another Deck Tech with the Lab Maniacs. Thanks for watching.